You're listening to the Heart of Giving podcast with Art Taylor, powered by bbbgive.org. Here we explore the motivations that form the basis of giving and service. We inspire generosity and celebrate the transformative effects that giving and service have on the human spirit and on community. The conversations featured on the podcast also uncover giving strategies that educate and provide tools to help listeners make impactful gifts of both their time and money. We hope you enjoy this episode.
This is the final of a two-part episode. We released part 1 last week. I hope you'll check that out. You know, this podcast has a lot to do with philanthropy. Yeah. And in order to make this story possible, it took a lot of philanthropy. And I know it's not always easy to raise money, but I think we had a notion that if we came up with the right ideas, that we would be able to at least convince the board at Franklin and Marshall, and now others, that investing philanthropically in these ideas could yield some huge results for society.
Well, especially with the idea of talent, as opposed to what other value might be more appropriate. Right. Talent, you can't dislodge talent as a central value of a learning community. And I think that we also showed a willingness, and this actually was before me with John Fry also, and no doubt with Barbara Altman afterwards. We would leverage all the assets we could outside of philanthropy to add to the aid budget, while also inviting and encouraging our alums and parents and other supporters to invest in aid. You know, are you doing everything you can to prioritize aid? And then as you prioritize aid, are you also prioritizing student success? And I think for lots of reasons, it all came together really well. And so in building a robust financial aid budget, which F&M's been able to sustain, we've positioned the school to be seen as a place of opportunity. And that is, again, good for every student and all alums. And hopefully in the future, we'll see an alumni body that reflects this aspirational, striving mindset that we're going to be the best school, we're going to get the top talent, we're going to believe in one another, and we're going to go create the future we want.
And what do you say to the critics of liberal arts education in particular? It's higher ed in general now, but it's certainly liberal arts.
So this book is one way to answer the critics, because I say, if you read this book, you're going to see 35 stories of young people from all backgrounds, upper income, middle income, lower income, who said yes to opportunity and pushed themselves to create the education they sought. You read that book, there's no way you can say, well, there's not something really powerful happening when students opt in and when the school responds to student aspiration. There may be issues around the cost of education, absolutely, it should be addressed, or issues around who does or doesn't have access, absolutely. But let's make sure we look at what's happening that works so that we can do more of what works and fix the things that aren't working.
Well, there are two students you talk about in addition to Diggs, a lot of students you talk about, but I want you to tell Markera's story and also Akbar's story.
All right, cool. So thank you. This is what the pleasure of this whole book was, talking to all these different students I knew to, with them, draw out how did their growth trajectory unfold. And in every case, the agency of the student is pivotal. We create the learning we seek. So in the last chapter of the book, I write about something that Michelle Obama describes beautifully about becoming. She says we're on a journey to become, we push and strive and grow, we're ever closer to the person we want to be. And that feeling of becoming is a intrinsically valuable moral feeling. In fact, if you feel that you're trapped in a life that you cannot become what you're meant to be or what you hope to be, that is stultifying and discouraging. And our world needs all people to feel they have the power with their own actions to become. And so to exemplify this notion of becoming, I chose to profile in the last chapter 3 students, all of whom were from Pennsylvania high schools. This is by design to show this, right in Pennsylvania. None of whom would have ended up at F&M, but for the combination of their own hopes A single college advisor and Franklin and Marshall having a talent strategy that met them in terms of financial aid with what they needed. So one of those students is Akbar Hussein, who quickly, I'll say, he came here having grown up as a child in a workers' factory in Saudi Arabia, having gone there from Bangladesh because his father, as a welder, was making money for the family. He and his mom and brother and father entered what's called the diversity lottery, which they learned about in a mall in Saudi Arabia. They won.
Wow.
Very hard to win.
Wow.
1%, half of 1%. And so they were legal immigrants to America who renounced everything in a sense because they had to give up the job in Saudi Arabia. There's no going back to Bangladesh. They get on a plane with hope, belief in themselves, because this idea of America stands for the future. And they land in Kennedy Airport. The sponsor that's supposed to meet them doesn't show up. The next day is September 11th, 2001. And so Mr. and Mrs. Hussein and their two sons are kind of like wandering in Newark and New York for a month. They running out of money. They have nowhere to go back to. They came from Saudi Arabia. What are they going to do? Right. And people in a restaurant in Newark connected them to a mosque in Norristown. The family resettled. The mosque filled in everything. The children started going to school post 9/11, challenging. In the journey to make life possible, the father works so hard that he dies. And Akbar and Kabir become the sort of the leaders of the family with their mom. Akbar works in a 7-Eleven and a gas station on the Pennsylvania Turnpike. He learns, well, with my high school degree, I'll get a $10 an hour salary. Mom is ecstatic. One high school counselor said to Akbar, before you take that opportunity of $10 salary, which is good, look at some colleges. He goes to Franklin and Marshall College. He stays overnight on a visit. He meets other people like him. He suddenly sees, oh my gosh, this is a land I want to walk into. I don't know what I'll become, but this is what I want. Goes back and tells his mom, I'll make more money with a college degree, I think. Let me do it. She says, yes. Many good things happen. I'll come back to that. The second is Sheldon Ruby. He comes from a part of central Pennsylvania, Everett, Pennsylvania, where almost nobody went to college. Wow. Almost nobody. In fact, many saw college as a doorway that a young person will walk through and never return. And he himself willed himself to have a great high school experience, willed it so hard that he stayed with a neighbor family near his school because he could then be at school all day and in the evening, as opposed to driving an hour home back and forth. That itself was a giant gesture of opportunity, of saying, I want opportunity. His high school counselor said to him, you should look at an F&M program that's for talented students over the summer. She pushed him to do it. He said, okay, I'll try it. Walks on the F&M's campus. He's never met an African-American. He's never met a Muslim. He's never met somebody gay or lesbian. His fun moment with every teacher was asking them, hey, do you think evolution's an opinion? And he loved it. And then after that summer, applied, we accepted him, we met his full financial need. And then that story goes on. And then the third one's Markera Jones. And she comes from Coatesville, Pennsylvania. And I think it's fair to say that in the environment where she grew up, segregation was the norm in housing, in schooling, in public health, in jobs, almost everything. And when she was younger, she was invited a couple times to join an honors class in her middle school and then in Coatesville High School, where she would have been the sole Black student. And in both of the cases, she chose, doesn't feel right culturally, doesn't feel affirming. And so she went on a track where all the Black students were, and she had good friendships and she excelled. And she knew inside that she didn't pursue something that was offered to her because it wasn't really going to be nourishing of her sense of self. And I totally get that. But she also hungered for more. A single college advisor outside of the school met her and introduced her in an Upward Bound program to Franklin and Marshall and other schools. Took her around to them and showed her what college life could be. At the same time, the college advisor at her high school, who she only met once, handed her a piece of paper and said, sign here. to go to an open access public institution with a 10% graduation rate. Mm. She said, no, I think I'm going to try this other place, Franklin and Marshall, which met her whole financial need and more.
And so now we have a chance to actually speak with Markera. And I wanted to just ask you, Markera, about your experience at F&M. Tell me, in your own words, what it was that drew you to that school and how you managed your college career there and what it's meant to your life.
Thank you, Art, for the question. Good to be here. So, why I chose F&M? What drew me to F&M? I went on a visit with my Upward Bound counselor. We were having a college tour. And at first, when F&M was listed on the kind of college tour agenda, I didn't feel any particular way towards it. It was the closest university to home or college to home for me. And I was trying to get far away from home. So I wasn't excited about visiting. And also I had never heard about it, even though it was so close. My idea of it was this very upper class, white, probably just one of those institutions that I had never had access to, never heard of for various reasons. But when we went on the visit, I remember just feeling a sense of welcome on the campus. The campus services, the way that they toured and the way that they talked about the university or the college. Sorry, I keep saying university. The way they talked about the college, the different opportunities that I would have there to do research, to learn more in psychology. They had all types of nice labs, and it seemed like spaces that were well funded and well resourced for me to really like learn things in a way that I feel I didn't get in high school or these other experiences in education. So I was really excited about that. And it was kind of smaller. The campus was beautiful. I just got a really good feel for the campus itself. I also got to spend some time getting to know some of the people who were also on the tour, like other prospective students. So that was a real big help because I got to see, oh, there are other people who maybe have a similar background to me that were also trying to feel out F&M, and I was able to talk with them about what their experience was so far on the tour and all this other stuff. So that was my initial impression. I was like, okay, I am now going to add this to my list of places I'll apply to. It seems like it's going to be very challenging and rigorous for me. And that is something that I really needed because I was just really not getting a lot of challenge the way that I needed for my gifts and my talents and in school. So I think I was kind of hungry for that as well. I think at the time they were listed as number 4 most rigorous colleges. So I was like, okay, like I want to be. I had reached the point in my high school, in my educational career, where I could like really stand firmly in. I am a smart girl, and I am nerdy, and I want to be academically challenged. And that took a lot. It took me a really long time to get to that place. So I think F&M, when I went, it showed me that I could kind of lean more into that with all the opportunity. Now, I will say after I applied to F&M and I got in and they sent out the acceptance letters, I applied to 7 different colleges. I got into all of them. F&M's financial aid package was the best one that I got out of all of the ones I applied to. And I also, I had applied to Howard University. I really, at first thought I wanted to go to HBCU, and, there's surely so much benefit to going. I was just disappointed in all the colleges that I applied to in the lack of kind of financial aid And F&M's package stood out because they were offering a grant in a significant amount. They were offering grants for some of those years. And I was afraid of taking on student loans. And I did end up still taking out small loans, but that grant, which I think it was listed as a trustee grant or the board of trust. Yeah, it was like some grant that it comes from donors. It comes from people who want to fund, talent. And I realize now that that was a part of the strategy at F&M, but it really helped me to see, okay, these people believe in me, they value me, they do want me to come here, and they want to invest in me in that kind of way. So I definitely, yes, I made the decision also off of the package. It just kind of sealed the deal for me after that. Yeah.
So when you got to F&M, what did you find?
Well, when I got to F&M, I found it was so white. It was so white and rich. It was so much, there was so much resources. Um, but I think I'm really lucky because I think my cohort of people was also it brought in a lot of diversity into the culture at F&M, which I was really fortunate for. So I also felt that although this was a very different experience for me, that I had some community, and I was also not the only first generation college student there. So I wasn't alone in that either. I did feel like I was able to find my people. And actually after I got accepted, there was this other program that they put on for college freshmen, incoming freshmen, to go and connect with other freshmen of color, first gen students. No, I don't think that they were first gen, but I think other freshmen of color, I think, in March before the first semester started. And that's where I met my closest friends. For the first time before we even got to start the year, I was able to find community, and I think that did wonders when I met my best friend in that program. So I think once I did finally make it to campus and started the year, I didn't feel so alone. I had gotten some, a heads up about how it's going to be on campus because we had lived there for like about a week with this program. Um, and that was really valuable for me. So yeah, that's a little bit about what it was like when I finally like made it in.
Well, you achieved some things there that not very many achieve relative to grade point.
Mm-hmm.
You want to tell me about that?
Sure.
I don't mean to embarrass you. A
Sure.
lot of us, I went to Franklin and Marshall, and my numbers were not anything to speak about, believe me.
Mm.
But yours are definitely something to speak about. So tell us about your performance there.
Yes. So, yes, it is true. In my first year, got all A's in all of my classes, both semesters. Um, I am unsure, of how to really speak about that still. I was, I think the way that I put it to Dan when he did call me in. I made the dean's list, obviously the honors list. And then he called me in and he's like asking me how I did this. And I'm like, it's what I do. I just get good grades. Maybe I write notes, or I have good note taking strategies. Maybe I learned some good study skills, right, from Upward Bound or something. Um, but even though I will say that even though I was doing well academically, I was also really social. So yeah, when I look back, I do kind of wonder too. I think I was just really hungry, and I think I was just very like into it. I was very engaged. It felt really good to be engaged in that kind of way, in a way that's challenging me. I was doing F&M is very writing heavy, and I'm a very great writer. And so I think that worked to my advantage really well. Like, I've just always been really good at writing. I wanted to be an English major at first. But yeah, so I think some of that has to do with it too.
Well, writing helps. So you graduated, and then you've now gone on to do some other things. Talk about how F&M has helped you in your present situation.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so at F&M, I got to have my first research experience, where I not only did I work in a lab, psychology, so it was a personality psychology research lab. I with another faculty member, it felt very like special because this is the stuff that I was seeing on TV, I think, where you're in a lab, you operate this experiment, and you're writing, and it's only me, my other lab member, and the faculty member, and it felt very personal. It felt like I was doing this really important work, kind of in research, giving back to like creating knowledge. And then for my senior year, I ended up kind of using some of the things I learned from that research experience to do my own kind of honors thesis in psychology. And that individual research that I did, right? Yes, I was under advisement, but I created this whole kind of experiment and this research question from my own ideas. And that was the first time that I had that experience. And it's very valuable to have that experience in college, in undergrad, because in graduate school, you need, I mean, because in graduate school, it comes in handy just kind of to know your way around research. So that is what F&M has given me. It has given me like an opportunity to explore my own career, research interests, explore my own abilities, my own capacity to do really research focused work. And it taught me a lot about myself. I mean, when you're studying psychology, you learn a lot about people. You learn a lot about why you are the way you are and why things are. And I wanted to continue that. I didn't originally. I had planned to apply to graduate school right after graduating F&M, like transition and go. But some stuff came up. It didn't work out that way, and I ended up doing Teach for America though, for the 2 years. So after F&M, I did apply to Teach for America because, again, I had always been interested in education as well, and again, English. And so what I ended up doing was getting into Teach for America Memphis and being an English teacher and high school English teacher, and special education teacher. So that was very helpful for me too. And F&M had a really good I think they had a like really targeted mentorship and really targeted, almost like a pathway for people to get into education through Teach for America. So it was really nice to receive that and know that I was going to be solid after, get a solid experience after graduating. And so I did Teach for America in Memphis. And then while I was at Teach for America, I had even more revelations, as you can imagine. Like, I am in a whole different environment with a different type of school district than I grew up in. And it was very challenging in a good way. It pushed me to expand on my ideas of, what education should be like for all students. And I wanted to make change not only in students' lives individually as they're coming in my classroom, but changes that will last in communities and structures and systems. And so I was like, I want to go to get my graduate degree in psychology, not only because I'm interested in helping individuals overcome things and understand themselves and make them aware of the systemic things going on in their lives, right? I also want to learn what it would take for me to be an advocate for a change in systems as well. And so that's kind of how I got into grad school. Yeah. Yeah.
Well, Dan has you in his book,
Mm-hmm.
Mindset Matters. And I wanted to just conclude by asking you, what was it about your mindset that mattered?
What is it about my mindset that mattered?
And maybe continues to matter?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I think when I think about the age that I was and what sometimes it's so hard to access that that person. But, you know, I think that a part of my mindset was I was very, very focused. Like I was very focused in a way that I wanted to challenge myself. I wanted to consistently improve and just kind of beat my own records. I wasn't really worried about how I fared compared to other people. I wasn't worried about what other people were doing and how they were spending their time and what their grades were like compared to mine. I was really, really invested in um, feeling a sense of accomplishment for what I am putting out and also what I'm learning. I really just really always loved learning and being able to demonstrate learning, I think. So when I say focus, I think that's the thing. I was always focused on learning more and exploring. I had a curiosity about how do these things work, right? What makes one person great at this, but another person not great at this, right? And as you can imagine, I had a very psychologically minded personality, but really it was just always curiosity and wanting to learn, and I always just had that present that was always there. um and I was, in the sense of curiosity, I wanted more new experiences because I found that even just going into college was such a new thing, um, for me, for my family. There was so much to explore, and I felt like I was pioneering almost. Actually, I think I like that word, pioneering, because all throughout college, I felt like that. Like, I felt like, oh, this is my next thing. I want to see what this is like, right? I want to learn about how people experience this part of the curriculum, right? Or like this internship. I studied abroad. I just wanted to do things just to learn about how to navigate that and what it would feel like. So, yeah, that curiosity, that kind of pioneering spirit. Yeah.
Great. Well, Markera, thank you. And congratulations for everything you're setting out to do and some of the things that you've already done. You kind of broke the records a bit at F&M. So now somebody else has to come along, although it's hard to break 4.0. I don't know how you get any better than that. So congratulations.
Thank you
And,
so much.
obviously, we'll be staying in touch. And, as a F&M grad, we're brother and sisterhood. So
Mm-hmm.
especially those of us who are from people of color.
Mm-hmm.
So, we want to make sure that we always are connected and able to support each other.
Yeah.
Now, those three, Akbar Hussein, Sheldon Ruby, Markera Jones, a Muslim immigrant, a white rural Christian student, a African American student living with generational poverty and segregation. They go to Franklin and Marshall College. They create their learning education. They're friends with one another. They're learning in faculty supported research opportunity. They're volunteering. They're running for student government. They're taking part in mentoring of younger kids. Each of them had a whole, full, rich college experience. A lot to say about each. Today, in their early 30s, Sheldon Ruby won a Rangel Fellowship, which allowed him to live with a Muslim family in Indonesia as part of a Fulbright program. And then he got his master's degree, and now he's a diplomat representing the United States in Africa in the State Department. Markera Jones is a clinical psychologist. She's earned her PhD after serving and teaching for America. Her practice includes her desire to help students who are in lower income communities learn the principles of mindfulness so that they can have ownership and agency in their life. And Akbar Hussein became the first ever Truman Scholarship winner for F&M. Wow. Went to University of Pennsylvania Law School, had a couple of great jobs, and now is in the cabinet of the governor of Pennsylvania as the head of policy. And so when we look at these stories, each has an eminence of individual aspiration and beauty, which is about the students striving, the school's support, a college advisor's belief in them, a family's support. Each one is a path breaker, but our country is so much better because Markera Jones is a clinical psychologist and Akbar Hussein is informing policy and Sheldon Ruby's a diplomat. And so I view the best form of education as the one that helps the one and the many, that unlocks talent and sees talent in every corner in community. And that by investing in young people, whether financial aid or just as important in their learning and their formation, we make a better world. Yeah. And the one thing I know for sure about those three is that they aren't done growing and striving. Right? This is just the beginning.
James, what did your college education mean to you about growth?
One, I would say, not that the actual education part wasn't important, but I think like going to the book itself and the story in there, it was the third space or fifth space, I forget what that term was, but it was the learning that happened around the educational piece. Even though I could rattle off great classes that I had, including one I had with Dr. Porterfield, it's the times where I was asked to step into being the story that you started to tell when I was in the student broadcasting club, and all of a sudden I'm doing play-by-play for sports that I don't know, and I have to learn about learning field hockey was like, even though it's not like I'm still using those like terms that I learned today, it still was that moment of like, oh yeah, I can do this. I can take an hour and look up what does that hand signal mean, and what does that card mean, and why did the clock stop, and be able to explain that to other folks so that they can learn too. Or it's being asked to co-lead the development of the college house. Like I'd call it the ethos, not just the Constitution, which I was directly involved in, but my co-partner Rosa DiPiazza was involved with just the traditions and like how our like RAs and would interact with students, and what each floor or hall would do, and all of the different college houses already had that established. We had to really come up with, well, how are we going to do that moving forward? So there was so much done in the classroom that was important and was like, really informative for me, especially as a government major and a undeclared history minor. I probably should have declared that. That speaks to how I function as a person, especially from a government perspective, learning the systems of government rather than specifically learning like, this is communism. It was, oh no, here's the German Bundesrat. And it's set up this way because of X, Y, and Z. Here are the Westminster parliamentary systems. Each one is different, but they're derived from this one singular vision of what government can look like, driven by the people. That also helped with the Constitution writing, but that what now was then New College House, now Rochelle College House. Helped in my first full professional job working with the consortium of small liberal arts colleges, where we had to sort of think through, how do we connect with, we knew we had to connect with the presidents, and Dan was one of them at the time, but there were the vice presidents we had to connect with. There were the associate VPs we needed to connect, deans, directors of offices and institutes. And then that government background sort of helped me think through, oh, here's a way to structure like initial engagement, so that then if we can't drive everything, we have to instill ownership. How do we instill ownership in these folks so that they feel connected to the work that we're doing collectively, but can still feel it on their home campus or institution of higher level. All of that tracks back to how F&M goes about the work of enriching the mind of the young people that are privileged to go there, but also creating those spaces outside of the classroom to even, I think that's the benefit of that liberal arts education in the small college environment, to have those both opportunities in those 4 years.
So let me build on something here. A great learning environment provides a resource-rich ecosystem, but it doesn't micromanage the students for every learning opportunity. Right. But gives them the freedom to pursue what they would like to experiment with, which will sometimes lead to breakthrough growth and sometimes to like, oh, setback, or there's a learning lesson here in the non-success. All good. But so in Robert's case, it's like he has night goggles on, but it's different. But you know, have night goggles, you see everything differently. Yeah. He has an inbuilt orientation to see an ecosystem with its many different assets and features, nodes of activity, resources. He sees the landscape with a different lens than most people have. And I saw that instantly when I was meeting him, because he was telling me things about F&M that I needed to learn. And it wasn't like other people had the same insights about how parts connect or who does what or what's an interesting explorational moment happening on campus. He had it all. And so where does that come from? From how you grew up, from living in Brooklyn, from the schools you went to. But that particular talent is extraordinarily valuable for life. But it's almost impossible to measure for, and you're not even sure you can say you enhanced it because it already was at apex predator level. So, but that's what a great ecosystem does. It lets people cultivate that talent,
and people learn from him.
Exactly,
I learned from you.
Of course, you.
So we're getting to the end, but there's two things I really think we need to cover. First of all, this idea of talent didn't end at Franklin and Marshall. In fact, it was something that you were able to extend, right, to other institutions. The second thing is the team that you were able to assemble at Franklin and Marshall to help you do this. And I want to specifically shout out Daniel Lugo, who helped with your admissions program to help get the students in here, who's now going to be, I understand, president of Trinity College, right? He just moved up from a college from Queens
University. So we there's talent all over the campus. Everybody's an educator. Every person. They work in the athletics department. They work in housekeeping. They work in the cafeteria. They work in the registrar's office. They teach classes. They're the administrative assistant in a department. Everybody's an educator. You sort of want to take that approach because the students are learning from the ecosystem, from everybody around them. Is everybody sending messages that you can grow? Or are they sending messages, hey, you're only good at some things and not the thing I assess you at? And I'm not a big fan of sort of capacity limiting engagements, whatever they might be. And it's amazing how the non-faculty across the institution almost always are growth mindset oriented. They want to work in colleges. They believe in young people. They love being around the sense of possibility they see in those. And so I think good schools should ignite that even more. And so that the senior leadership level, our admission team was fabulous. And Eric McGuire followed Daniel Lugo. Julie Carrick was the thread through both of their leadership roles. Our financial aid office learned to adapt and to provide a new kind of support as we grew our budget. So I like to think we greased the gears of the institution so it was more responsive to an emergingly more inclusive student body with high aspiration. And I think that really happened. In the faculty, there are a lot of people I write about in the book who provided the signature moment to unlock talent with students in an important way. And Rob Jenks did it with Eddie Alsina, and Morgan Kincaid had these amazing first-year experiences with Misty Bastian that helped her use her shyness as a strength as opposed to a limit. Carolina Giraldo was taught by Professor Liu in painting on Saturdays because that was the only time she was free, and he made time to come in and be with her then. She used art as a way of cultivating a whole self in college. Now she's a doctor, and she's still got a whole vibrant sense about the creativity as part of her life. So that the faculty role in particular really matters. And I think that's a calling, I would say, this book suggests, is that to be a professor is to care for the future of the people you're working with and to want to be inside their mind as this like demigod or demigoddess that believed in them, that supported them, challenged them, nudged them, held them accountable to their own aspirations and believed in them. And I saw that again and again at F&M and love it.
And the American Talent Initiative?
So because of the great work we were all doing together at F&M, I want to say we all, the students were part of the talent strategy. because it was the students who were informing where do we go next in order to be an even more vibrant and inclusive, functioning at a high level community. So it was students that created the impact group, for example. It was students that created the first gen diplomats group. It was students that turned the debate team into this national level winner. So much of what happens in a great school is powered by students and should be supported by students, and supported by students, faculty, and staff. So we started to get a reputation for being a place that was on the move. And there were a number of news stories written about us, including one on the front page of the Washington Post, which they termed a quote recruiting revolution, which is, I love that thing, but why aren't all schools trying to recruit talent? Right. And I was driving up and down 95, trying to find very, very high net worth people to invest in F&M's financial aid. A couple of times things might have driven me. And we were always trying to show the world that F&M was doing what many schools either are doing but aren't seen doing or should do. Finally, Michael Bloomberg's team said, why don't we support your idea by empowering you to see if you can create an affinity group, a coalition of the willing of top schools to all commit to increasing enrollment and graduation and success of low-income students. And Mike Bloomberg said, I want to call it the American Talent Initiative. And that came right out of this idea that we developed at F&M, that it was a talent strategy. Could have called it a diversity strategy, a justice strategy, a revenue strategy, whatever. We called it a talent strategy, lived it as that. And so today, there are 130 institutions, including the entire Ivy League, most liberal arts institutions, big top private ones like MIT or Chicago or Duke, that have joined, have said, we're going to increase enrollment of low and moderate income students because we know those students have the talent to both thrive and enrich the student body. And collectively, the 130 institutions in this Bloomberg-funded, Aspen-run American Talent Initiative have enrolled, as of today, right now, today, there are 18,000 more Pell Grant students in those schools than there were 6 years ago, which is like creating 3 whole Duke universities only for low-income students. Wow. That's the power of that. Yeah. There's many issues to work on in higher ed. This is just one. Right. But we shouldn't forget that it matters that students with high aspiration have a chance to go to the institutions where there is the best financial aid programs and so many resources for life after college.
Amazing. Well, Dan Diggs, thank you so much for agreeing to do this show. And you know how this means, what this all means to me, being a lifelong learner and board member.
Well, and from a philanthropy perspective, philanthropists invest in many important things, many things that are new and startup and experimental, and that's very valuable. And we need to support our institutions.
Absolutely.
Because institutions ultimately provide a ballast in society that people can count on. Institutions have to be held accountable to continue to evolve and serve the public. But when philanthropists say, I want to double down on making sure that institutions that were successful in the past are even more successful in the future for an even bigger spectrum of people, whether those are students or other kinds of people relying on them, we renew American democracy.
Yeah. Well, this is the Heart of Giving podcast, and I'm Art Taylor, and you have heard an amazing series of stories, I'll say. I hope you get the book, Mindset Matters. And for those of you who are listening to this for the first time, this is a weekly show. Every Tuesday, we have a new episode. I hope you will subscribe to the show. You can see our YouTube version of it, which is obviously in video, but there's also an audio version that you can get on all major podcast platforms. Please subscribe and stay in touch. Thanks for joining.
You've just listened to the Heart of Giving podcast with Art Taylor. Be sure to tune in next time for a brand new episode. To listen to our other interviews, visit heartgiving.podbean.com. That's heartgiving.podbean.com. Subscribe to our show on major podcast platforms. The thoughts and opinions expressed on this podcast are the views and opinions of the guests, not those of the BBB Wise Giving Alliance or program affiliates. This podcast is for information and educational purposes only and is copyrighted with all rights reserved. This podcast is protected by Podbean's terms of service.